Hey, friends, welcome back to a new episode of Master Your Marriage. So, if you remember last week, we talked about self esteem and what real self esteem is and what it isn't, and how it's not some pseudo self confidence that comes from how much money we make or how much people like us. Real self esteem is this internal, steady sense of I have value and I am worthy of love and respect simply because I exist and so does everyone else. We also talked about, named the two big distortions of self esteem that hijack so many of us: shame, which is that felt sense of being less than or defective or unlovable. And then the flip side of the coin, which is grandiosity. And that is that felt sense of being above, entitled, or superior. And both of these are distortions. They're both lies, and both destroy the relationship that we have with ourselves as well as the relationship that we have with others.
And today we're going to talk about the why. This episode isn't going to be the surface level, just love yourself advice. We're going to go deep into the actual mechanism of these distortions and how early childhood traumas shape the part of our psyche that then carries and replays these patterns for decades. So grab a notebook, open up your note apps, whatever it is you're going to use to take notes in. This episode has the power to change you, how you see yourself, and everyone that you love. Let's dive in. Coming up next on Master Your Marriage.
All right. So, to understand how shame and grandiosity get installed in us and why they are such automatic behaviors,
So automatic.
right? We have to first understand a fundamental map of the human psyche. So bear with us a little bit. I think you'll actually enjoy this conversation. So in Terry Real's relational life therapy model, we say there are three parts of the human psyche. Now, the first part is what we often refer to on the show here as the wise adult. And this is the part of our psyche that operates from our prefrontal cortex. And that prefrontal cortex, of course, is that part of the brain that finishes developing last, actually, not until we're around age 26. It's the part of you that can pause, reflect. It can understand things aren't always black and white, but they're often nuanced. And it's the part of you that can take in new information. The wise adult can respond instead of react. It can collaborate and find win-win solutions instead of needing to win. And it's that part of us that can say, you know what, hun, I am feeling a bit triggered right now, but I'm going to choose something different. So what does that sound like? That sounds like it's the mature part of your psyche. And it is. But there's also these two immature parts of our psyche, which Robert is going to talk about in just a second, that are automatic and not so thoughtful.
The first is the wounded child. Now, this is the very young subcortical limbic part of you, the raw, flooded, terrified part of you that was on the receiving end of whatever hurt or neglect happened to you in early childhood. It is not strategic. It's just feeling it. Terry says this beautifully. This part of us just wants to crawl up on someone's lap and cry and be held for about 1,000 years.
It's all in the feels.
Yep.
And then there's the third part. And this part sits between the wise adult mind and the wounded child. And it is called the adaptive child. So we could call this part of us the strategist, because it is the part that learned very early what it had to do in order to survive in your particular environment with your particular family. It is the part of you that adapted, hence why it's called the adaptive child. And it had to adapt to whatever it had to adapt to. And it's what you do still today when you go into fight, flight, or fix mode. And when that mode kicks in, we're going to talk more about that in just a sec.
Most of us, and by most of us, I mean all of us, have spent a majority of our adult lives, especially in our intimate relationships, operating from our adaptive child.
Mm-hmm.
And this version of us is just a kid in an adult body. But it got us through some hard things. It adapted to experiences that in many ways were brilliant for a child. But here we are decades later, and it's still running the show with the same old strategies that it developed to help fend off these traumatic moments as a child.
So true. And here is, I think, a really important takeaway as it relates to shame and grandiosity, which is what this whole series that we're doing right now is all about.
Absolutely.
And that is that the adaptive child part of us is the part that carries the shame, that carries the grandiosity. It's the adaptive child part that absorbed those messages and then rehearses those messages and replays them often on autopilot.
So let's get specific about the adaptive child's toolkit, its skills, maybe you would say. When you feel criticized or things are starting to get heated, when fear sets in, such as maybe fear of vulnerability, fear of abandonment, which I have, the adaptive child has three main moves: fight, flight, or fix. And I sort of think about this as a character. Our boys love to play Smash Brothers when they all get together.
Mm.
That's from our adult kids all the way to our 17-year-old. And they're always picking characters who, and if you've played this game, you know that these characters all have different strengths. Like, oh, he has this, and oh, he has that, or oh, he has this. So when we think about the adaptive child, his three strongest attributes are fight, flight, or fix.
So what does fight do?
So fight is, as you might think, right? We attack, we hurt the other person, retaliate, we defend, we argue, we blame, we get indignant and righteous, and generally escalate the whole situation.
Yep. So just as it sounds, fight.
Yep.
By the way, I'm a fighter. And then you have flight. And flight, when we learn that as an adaptive strategy, we may withdraw. It also looks like stonewalling, shutting down. You might physically run away, get in the car and drive down the road. You might just leave the room, or you could stay in the room while completely emotionally leaving the room. Not, you might physically be present, but you could be zoning out or going numb. And then there's the
and the
last
third one, right?
Mhm.
So the third one is fix or fawn. This is where you overfunction, you people please, you apologize for just even existing. You twist yourself in pretzels to make sure that everyone around you feels good, feels okay. And if they feel good and they feel okay, then you can feel safe.
Mhm.
And you think, if I can just make everybody happy, then they won't leave me or they won't be upset with me. I'll be fine.
Yep, exactly. So fight, flight, fix. So I want to pause here for just a second and check in with you. And I want you to really sit with this question. Okay. When you are in your adaptive child, now I want you to contextualize this to your intimate sexual relationship that you are in currently. Where do you go? Where do you tend to go when your adaptive child takes over? Do you go into fight? Do you go into flight? Or do you go into fix? Name it. Go ahead and just say it out loud.
And we want you to be honest here. There's absolutely no judgment. Right? Just notice whether it's fight, flight, or fix. I can tell you from me,
Mm.
it tended to be, and sometimes still can be fix. I just want people to be happy.
Yeah. And that's our pattern early in our relationship. Robert will share more about why his adaptive child came up with fix. Mine was fight. But what I do want you to know is that this should be contextualized to your romantic relationships, because for me personally, I am very much a fight person in my relationship with Robert, but I tend to be a little bit more flight when I'm in other relationships. And if you're not in a current relationship with someone, you can look back at your last intimate sexual relationship that you had and what was your pattern? Fight, flight, fix.
And I think that's important when Charlotte talks about in context, because we really have to think about this. We are different people at work and in the world than we are at home,
Mhm.
especially when we're at home and we're starting to be triggered and we're in something that's deeply important to us.
Because I don't think anybody triggers us the way that our immediate closest relationship does.
Absolutely. But whatever strategies you've created, they have worked brilliantly for you when you were a small child. They helped you fit in. They helped you feel safe. They helped you feel love and also deal with trauma. But even though it helped you then, it's likely costing you a great deal in your relationship now.
Mhm. And that's because the adaptive child only has one job,
Yeah.
which is to survive, right? It's that when it takes over, it's that knee jerk reflexive reaction. And it is so intense because To the adaptive child, it's almost as though I have to do this thing or I'm going to die or they're going to leave me. And that intensity that you feel in those moments is the hallmark of the adaptive child. It feels super existential in those moments because to the child, it once was. So here is a key learning. And just kind of to reiterate this, as we said earlier, it is the adaptive child part of us that carries old shame, that carries grandiosity. And that's because the adaptive child is what absorbed it and continues to replay it over and over. So, talk about that a little bit, Robert, about how the adaptive child absorbs
So
that.
we have to think about this the way it was when we were in our childhood. We experienced these, maybe they're micro traumas, the small little traumas, but there are many different types of traumas that we internalize. Sometimes it was an active violation like abuse, control, or rage. And sometimes trauma happens through passive neglect. You get the message that, hey, you know what? You're on your own head, kid. No one's coming to help you when you're hurt or when you're scared. I know that I had a lot of that messaging. But what matters here is that not all trauma is big, nor is it obvious. Often it's 1,000 little cuts that add up over time. But when it does, this devastating message becomes internalized. The message may be, you're not worthy of being treated well. And that is why this X thing is happening to you.
hmm And that message becomes part of the adaptive child's
I like that.
operating system. So for some kids, the shame that they experienced might have been explicit. It might have been outright like, what is the matter with you, kid? You really sucked at the sports today. Or, you know what? Your emotions are just too much. They're just too big for me to handle. Or, you're just not good enough at XYZ. So those might be the shame messages that you internalized. For some, it is the treatment that they received. And some, for others, it's the lack of treatment. It's the treatment they didn't receive, the parents that were just totally checked out. And so the adaptive child developed strategies to manage that unbearable feeling of unworthiness. Okay. And sometimes we compensate by creating the adaptation of grandiosity. So because the shame felt so intense, I move into a place of grandiosity above others where I'll just be perfect. I'll be above it all, above the rules, above others. And when you think about this from a child's perspective, that would have been a pretty brilliant move, a defense mechanism against these intense feelings of feeling small, of feeling powerless and not wanting to ever feel those things again.
Yeah. This is why simply deciding to have better self esteem rarely ever works, or why the advice, just love yourself more, pretty much just falls on deaf ears. You're trying to reason with a 5-year-old survival strategy that still thinks that if they don't self protect, they're not going to survive in the next 5 moments.
So this kind of reminds me of a story. I was working with a couple several months ago, and they had a lot of deception in their relationship and a lot of trust that had been broken. And she had this very strong compulsion to lie. Whenever the conversation would get heated or she felt like she'd be in trouble, she would immediately start to tell a story, and the story wasn't true. And so I shared with them one of Terry Real's great stories. We've shared similar ones. I think this is not that uncommon, actually. But Terry Real was working with this couple on the brink of divorce, and the husband was a chronic pathological liar. He lied about everything, even small things that were just ridiculous, that didn't matter at all. And his wife had finally had it. And so Terry asked him, well, who tried to control you growing up? Well,
Mm,
turns out the man's father was this rigid military man who controlled every detail, how he ate, what he drank, how he sat, how he dressed, who his friends were, every little detail. And so Terry asked him, how did you deal with that controlling father? And the man kind of smirked and said, I just lied.
yeah.
Well,
Smart little boy, right?
yeah.
He found a way to have some autonomy, some sense of self in a situation where maybe telling the truth would have been pretty difficult to deal with. However, let's fast forward 30 years. He's still lying now to his wife. the strategy that saved him as a child is really having devastating effect on his marriage as an adult.
Yeah. Like we said, I think it was last week or the week before, we said couples often fall out of love slowly and then all at once. I don't know if
Yeah.
you remember us saying that. When when we start working with the adaptive child and when couples start to see these behaviors as coming from an 8-year-old, all of a sudden they have so much more compassion for the other person that it kind of helps love to return. It's not excusing the behavior. We still need to step up and not let our adaptive child loose on our partner. But when we can understand where it's coming from, it develops so much compassion. We remember that the adaptive child isn't thoughtful. It's reflexive. It's automatic.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about I sort of had that fixed thing and my mom was married 4 times. And I don't want to say there's a parade of guys sort of coming in and out of my life, but I really lacked a father figure. My dad wasn't very much involved. And, it took a while, long even into our marriage, for me to realize that I had this abandonment wound where I would just continually worry about people leaving me, even though on the outside, I was a confident individual, relatively successful in the workplace. At home, I was just still concerned that even this relationship would end. And it was, and I was trying, my subconscious was just continuing to protect that adaptive child and deal with that abandonment wound.
Yeah. This has devastating impacts on relationships because we can't connect with someone if we are not same as. We cannot be intimate with someone unless we are same as. And so when Robert was approaching these conflicts from appeasement, from people pleasing, sometimes it felt a little bit like evading because he wasn't being honest and whole with me in these moments.
Oh, there was evading in there. I wouldn't tell you the whole truth about anything because if I exposed myself,
Mhm.
then you'd leave.
Right. Exactly. But see how much more compassion we can start to have when we understand the story that is behind those behaviors and how we're really not reacting. We're not behaving from our 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old self. We're reacting from our 8-year-old self. So, how do we begin to deal with shame and grandiosity? Well, here is what you need to know. You cannot intervene on shame or grandiosity while you're still inside your adaptive child mind. You just can't. Just like we've said before, the adaptive child cannot use skills, will not use skills. It doesn't want to be relational. It doesn't want a win-win solution.
It's in
It
survival mode. Yeah.
it's strictly in survival mode. It
Yeah.
simply wants to survive. So, to start to deal with our shame and grandiosity, which comes from our adaptive child, we have to start to learn how to work with the adaptive child and realize we have to actually move out of that adaptive child.
And the first move is pretty much always the same. When you're in fight, flight, or fix, realize that you're moving towards shame and grandiosity. Pause, take a breath, take a break, do some push ups, take a walk, whatever it is that you need to help you regulate and pull yourself out of what neurobiologist Dan Siegel calls the reactive mind and move into the responsive mind, or what maybe we would like to call the responsible adult mind. Then remind yourself, I'm here. This is me. This is Robert now. I'm a 60-year-old adult. I'm not 5 anymore, whose dad just left. The person in front of me is someone who I love, who I cherish. And I'm here now in this moment, no longer needing the childish strategies that helped me survive when I was younger.
Mm. And once you get yourself back into that centered place that Robert's talking about, then you can begin doing more work. But you're not going to be able to do anything from the adaptive child place. You have to first pull yourself back to your wise mind. I I had this dream once of my 8-year-old self. And it was an interesting dream because I saw her not realizing it was me, and I didn't know it was me until I saw her communicating with her little brother, which is my little brother. And I just saw her in this beautiful way, and I just thought how beautiful she was and how much love she had. And so I kind of picture my 8-year-old self when I
She
think
was
about,
cute. I've seen pictures of that
yeah,
8-year-old self, freckles, ponytails.
yeah. So I imagine my 8-year-old self when I'm thinking of my adaptive child. And so I think of her with love, not with harshness. And I like to imagine me now as my wise adult, sort of putting my arm around that little girl with total compassion, without any ill will or harshness and no shaming. And I say to her in my mind, you know what? I know why you created this strategy. I know that you did what you needed to do back then to stay whole. And I love you for it. You were so smart, so brilliant. And thank you for protecting me. That strategy that you came up with was genius for a little girl, but I need you to know that it's destructive now in this marriage. And together we can learn to do something better. And then I have to kind of demote her and say to her, you know what? I need you to take a back seat now. I love you. I appreciate you, but you are no longer driving anymore, especially in this relationship. Let me handle this conversation with Robert. He isn't the enemy. So let me be here to handle this moment.
This is what is important when we talk about the adaptive child, and it really is childish. And just to briefly recap, we talk about the development of our prefrontal cortex that doesn't really happen until about age 26. And we need to make adult decisions about complex adult situations. And nobody would ask a child to try and even assemble a decent solution to a complex problem like, boy, we can't pay the mortgage this month or something like that. Um, and that is why we need to figure out our best way to reprogram this adaptive child.
With love,
Yeah, with
with
love.
love, because like we said last week, there's nothing that harshness can do that loving firmness can't do better. And that goes for how we speak to and treat our adaptive child. Some people will look at their adaptive child and hate her and be more shameful to her. And that's not going to work. We just have to love her into taking the back seat.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for those of you who have heard our episodes on contempt, you know how corrosive contempt is in relationships. And here's a connection that I wanted to kind of illustrate today. And this is one of the deepest and most liberating pieces of Terry Real's teachings. Shame and grandiosity are not two different emotions. They are the same emotion, just pointed in two separate directions. And, and the emotion that is driving both shame and grandiosity is contempt. Think about that.
Yeah. So think of a flashlight for a second. And you think, I like to think of it, and this is how he explains it. I like to think of contempt like a flashlight. When the beam shines outward onto someone else, that is what we call grandiosity. It's shining contempt onto other people. What does that sound like? Why are you such an idiot? Are you a child? Do you need me to be your mommy? Do you need me to do that for you? Cannot you not handle paying the bills?
Yeah, how could you blank?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? I can't believe that you would even consider doing that, right? It's talking down at another person and looking down your nose as though you're on a throne and you're looking down upon them. And when the beam shines the other way, inward,
Same conversation.
it's the same conversation. What an idiot. What a loser I am. I am such a failure. Who would ever love me or want me? So it's the same energy, isn't it? It's just pointed in two different directions. And sometimes it's even the very same words. I have come to, as a recovering person, one up person who lived in contempt growing up, who expressed contempt to get my way. I have learned that contempt, whether you aim it at yourself or whether you aim it at another person, is a form of psychological violence. And that's a strong word. But what it does to the human body and what it does to relationships, that's what I believe. And contempt is the fuel that is powering both sides of the self-esteem disorder, both sides of the coin, whether it's grandiosity or whether it's shame.
Yeah, we talk about this to our children, and maybe you have as well. When your kids are going sort of one up and they're talking poorly or mean. Yet I don't know that we spend any time talking to our children as they're growing up
Mm,
about talking to themselves
mm,
that way.
that's a good point.
Like, it's not appropriate to speak to somebody else that way, yet for some reason, we don't spend any time saying it's also not appropriate for you to say those things about yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
The healing for both of these distortions, shame and grandiosity, is actually the same, which is turn off the flashlight, stop indulging in contempt in either direction. This is a daily practice that takes effort, it takes persistence, and we all can commit to doing better by striving to rid our language from contempt in two ways. One, I will not indulge in words or behaviors that are disrespectful to another human being. Two, which I think is difficult, I will not sit there and be disrespectfully spoken to or treated disrespectfully without doing something about it.
And I think with that one, with
Yeah.
number 2, that is gonna be pretty disruptive to your relationship.
Yeah.
Your partner now I look back at mine and Robert's relationship, I still struggle with the contemptuous thoughts. Those will still enter my mind, and I will still think them, but I don't let them come out of my mouth. And then for Robert, it's probably a little bit harder, or it was early in our relationship, to stand up for himself and to say, I will not be disrespected either because I deserve respect. And there was this time in our relationship when he finally kind of started moving out of this position and his wise mind was taking over. And he looked at me and he said, Charla, you can't treat me like this anymore. It's not okay. You can't talk to me the way that your mom talked to your dad. And I'm not going to live like this. And that was the first moment he stood up in such a way to me that he demanded respect for himself. And it was a powerful moment in our relationship.
Yeah, I remember that. It's funny. You remember it a lot more than I remember it, probably because I think my inner child is like, ooh, am I going to get hammered for this?
But we can't love, love can't exist without democracy. And democracy is same as you deserve love and respect, and you are just as valuable as I am. And I am no better than you, same as I have inherent worth and value, but no more than you.
That's actually what happened when I made that statement.
I know.
I wasn't saying anything else other than like we both deserve the same language.
That's right. So, as we kind of start moving into wrapping this episode up, one piece of advice that I think we could leave you with today is that before you speak, just ask yourself, is what I'm about to say disrespectful to the person I'm speaking to? And that includes myself. And if the answer is yes, it's time to shut your mouth, which I have to still do on a regular basis, and maybe take a break. This is how we start to heal shame and grandiosity at the root.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up this episode. The adaptive child is not the enemy. It was your loyal, brilliant protector. And it still thinks that it's 1987 or whenever your childhood was, and that the house is on fire and it has to protect you.
Yeah.
Your job as a wise adult is to thank it, love it, and gently but firmly take the wheel.
Next week, we are going to go even deeper into how to actively intervene when shame rises up in you. And we're going to give you more tools for dealing with shame. Until then, remember to be kind to the adaptive child inside of you. It really did do its best. So thank you so much for listening today. If this landed for you, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs it and leave a review if you haven't.
Remember this week, be kind to each other, put each other first. It's the small things done often that create the greatest impact.
Until next time.